Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we are taking a look at the action figure of your dreams. This is the NECA Nightmare on Elm Street Series 2 Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors. And, of course, when this figure came out, it made perfect sense. Wave 1 of Nightmare on Elm Street covered the first two films, the famous classic original and the lesser loved part 2, but still they gave us an awesome figure from a not so awesome movie. But knowing that they were going to move on and do part 3, I got really excited because I know I'm not alone in saying that is my absolute favorite of all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I was super excited to get Freddy from what I consider his truly most iconic film. Freddy might have gotten his start in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, but the Freddy that everybody knows from pretty much everything else came from Dream Warriors. So was I right to be so excited about getting my hands on this figure? Well, let's take a closer look and see. If there's one thing NECA can do right, it is accessories. And Freddy Krueger really doesn't have a whole lot of opportunity for accessories. So they kind of worked with what they had, and what they gave us was Kristen's paper mache Freddy house. But this is incredibly well sculpted, well done. It's obviously kind of how you see it in the beginning of the movie when she's still putting it together. We have the green popsicle sticks lining the roof, more popsicle sticks boarding up the windows, which looks cool, but if you really think about it, if she's going to continue putting these popsicle sticks on or coloring in areas, probably wouldn't have wanted to do this first, but yeah, that's just me being nitpicky on movie details. It does have this base, kind of concrete looking base, which looks cool. The paper mache texture is well done. A lot of good paint detail, darkening it up, making it look like it is real and dirty and messy and wet. The windows are pretty cool on it. They went with the dull look. They didn't light them up like they do kind of in the movie to begin her nightmare. And even the door, you can look, there's pillars there that are kind of separated out from the awning, which is really nice attention to detail. You gotta definitely appreciate the level of work NECA put into this thing. Now, of course, Freddy can't really do anything with this. He can't hold it. It's way too big, way too heavy. But it kind of works in that same level as the old Mezco accessories, the kind of diorama building pieces. This is cool just on the fact you stick it on the shelf next to Freddy, and it's another little piece of the movie with him. Freddy, of course, also comes with his hat, the same kind of hat we've gotten with the other Nightmare on Elm Street figures. It's kind of a softer, rubbery material. It almost kind of feels flocked a little bit, even though it isn't. It just kind of has the kind of rough texture to it, which is great. Good sculpting detail on it. Definitely just a pure Freddy fedora. A lot of brown weathering on it to make it look old and dirty. Pretty much exactly what you'd expect. But you can see in here, there's plenty of paint in there. And then, of course, if I pull the head sculpt up, you can see all the little black smudges around the top of his head. It's the one thing I dislike about these NECA hats. They definitely leave plastic residue on the figure. So you pretty much have to decide, am I displaying this figure with a hat or without a hat? Because depending on what you choose, it kind of could be irreparable damage to the figure. But speaking of head sculpts, this one is pretty sweet. It's a good representation of the makeup from Part 3. Part 3 also being a lot more of the iconic Freddy Krueger makeup. Part 1, he kind of had the boily looking thing. It was just completely different than any other movie. Part 2, he kind of almost had just saggy skin. Probably the closest to looking like healed burns. But this is what you think of when you think of Freddy. Kind of the pizza face thing going on. The cracks and gaps in his makeup, leaving you with the burnt flesh on top and the red flesh underneath. He has some gnarly looking teeth, some really nasty, just disgusting dentures in there. Now with this makeup job, they didn't really change much with Robert Englund's nose, so it's pretty much a normal looking nose on him. Good sculpt and paint detail all around on the head. My big gripe about this head is the fact that he's looking off to the side, and I am on record on this channel with a few figures complaining when characters are made to look off to the side all the time. We have head articulation on this guy, we have it on almost every figure, but to have the eyes looking at an angle means everything the character does has to be angled. When he's coming after you, you still have to have his head turned like that. And it could be just kind of awkward looking and kind of limits your posability if you want to get a correct eye line going on. I always think it's better to have the eyes centered and then you can turn the head to meet how you want them looking at things. But This just comes off a little weird to me. The head is also removable, and we could pop on the alternate head, which is pretty much the same head sculpt with an open mouth. The eyes are still looking to the side, but now we have a great tongue detail in there, some great inner mouth work that NECA did. They've gotten really good with this Freddy Krueger line of sculpting the inside of characters' mouths. It's kind of scary. But great detail there. Another cool head sculpt. You can see I put the hat on this one too and kind of messed that one up as well, unfortunately. Now, the prototypes for this figure actually showed a different alternate head sculpt. This is basically the same sculpt, but we had a little different play feature on there. And ironically, in the next wave of figures, we would get it. The Freddy Krueger head with the burned-in cross and the light piping. And I'll get to this later when I review that figure, but it was originally supposed to be this guy, and he just never got it, which is a little strange. Moving down the figure, of course, Freddy has his iconic chest of souls going on. The whole sweater, like it was in the previous incarnations, is a soft rubber. This added flap here is also soft rubber. And so is the chest. But on here you can see great detail of the faces screaming in pain amongst all the scarification on Freddy's chest. Some great detail. I love this guy down here with the little eye poking out and the gritted teeth. Another one moaning in pain there. Some really good detail work on NECA's part. Really enjoyable. We have the hard sculpted sleeves with the stripes on them. We have standard burnt Freddy hand, well painted, well sculpted. And of course the glove, we're still looking at the same glove mold we've looked at for Series 1, which was a little disappointing to me. I really hoped they'd give him a different hand position, but it's the same 2 fingers extended, 2 fingers down. I really think we should have gotten more of an open hand, like a striking, gonna slash you pose or something like that, but nothing new on this end. It's well painted. I know the Part 2 Freddy kind of had a little lacking paint detail. My blades aren't too horribly bent either. I haven't actually gone and fixed these because they're not that bad, but definitely is some good detail in there. You got the rivets on the back here. The copper's a nice color. A different color for this back piece, which I believe actually was supposed to be a different material. The glove itself is well done. But my gripe here is that with Part 1 and 2, I accepted having the same glove because it was the same glove. They used the same prop for both movies. Part 3, they rebuilt the glove from scratch, and it would have been a nice reason for NECA to rebuild this glove for us and make us a new Freddy hand. Further down, we have the same pants we have on all of these Freddy figures. I kind of wish we would have more articulation, especially now that the Jasons have full leg articulation. It would have been really cool to have Freddy with full leg articulation, but it works. It's a decent pre-post stance. He doesn't fall over too badly. And of course he has his work boots, same as always. These have a nice brown, dirty looking texture on them, which I definitely do like. One gripe I do have with this figure is the coloration on the sweater. And I know as the series went on, they kind of did tend to lighten the tone of Freddy's sweater and the makeup a little bit. But this is something that NECA would continue to do throughout the course of the Nightmare series and just lighten up the colors on his sweater a lot. And I really like the Part 2 with his dirty, dingy sweater. And then Part 3, you can see there's a noticeable difference in how bright it gets. It's gotten worse from here. This I still think is a tolerable color scheme, but it does get worse from this point on. And also the changing of skin tones, the changing of sweater colors, it makes the parts less interchangeable. If you wanted to do a Part 3 Freddy and just have him in a normal sweater, it's not going to mesh with your Part 2. You can't use the same sweater, you can't switch heads or anything, which is a little disappointing. Articulation, we have a ball joint at the neck, great range of motion up and down, side to side, all the good stuff you'd expect. Pin socket shoulders, forward back, out to the side. Once again, great range of articulation. Bend and swivel at the elbow. Not quite 90 degrees, but still pretty good. Ball jointed hands, a little limited because of the glove over here. The normal hand does have a much freer range of motion, but not bad on either side. As I've said with some of these other figures that NECA's done recently, they kind of have a weird joint system. There is the mid-torso crunch up here, and then also a waist joint. But because there's this big solid rubber piece over top, you get that articulation, but you can't really distinguish them from the other. If you look up inside there, you can see there is sculpting detail, and I believe that's where you can see and kind of feel the extra sculpted joints. But they're a little hard to identify. So I do believe there's 2 pieces in here, but for sake of simplicity, we'll call it a ball joint at the waist, swivel, back and forth, all the good stuff. And then, of course, the ball joints at the feet, which are very nice and very necessary to help them stand the way you want them to. Overall, I'm going to say this is a step down from Series 1 of Nightmare figures from NECA. But it's still a good figure, and I'm still going to recommend it. He's just not nearly as cool as those first two entries. Those first two were very gritty looking, very dark, very horrific. And they came with great accessories. This guy comes with a really cool house. I really dislike the fact that both heads have eyes angled off to the side. And the second head sculpt is really the first head sculpt with a different jawline to it, just an open mouth instead of a closed one, which is a little disappointing with the options you could go with Freddy Krueger. So it's a recommend, but not a strong one. It's a well sculpted piece, it's a well painted piece, it's just not as cool as some of the other entries in this series. Make sure you check out Outside the Box Reviews on Facebook. As always, there's a link in the bottom bar. Don't forget also, if you're watching this before July 1st, 2013, to enter the Outside the Box Reviews 1,000 subscribers contest. There'll be a link to that video with details on what you need to do in the bottom bar as well. And until next time, this has been another Outside the Box Reviews. And whatever you do, don't fall asleep.